All right, we are live. Marty, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You got it, man.
So why don't we start with doing just a quick intro and tell our listeners and viewers, because this will be viewable, a little bit about yourself.
I think you should tell us a bit about yourself, Dean.
Oh, we will. It'll be a little bit of both. Okay, well, you just flipped that on its head. So I'm Dean, and let's see, what can I share that I haven't shared already? Well, I think something that we have in common is that we both recently moved to BC in the last year. So we're new to BC. We're both from Manitoba, but you're originally from BC originally, isn't that right?
Not true. No, from Winnipeg.
No?
Yeah, from
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. But I did live out on the island for about 10 years before going back to Winnipeg.
And right. Then now you're back again.
Thankfully.
So let's just start there. What caused you guys to move back to BC?
Well, my wonderful partner, Joanna, works in the school, so she could take a job just about anywhere. And I had just exited my first business and was looking to go anywhere but Winnipeg. So we had essentially said, I had said actually, that if she picks any city outside of Winnipeg, Regina, or Saskatoon, that we could move there. And thankfully she wanted to move to Vancouver. So we packed our shit and we moved on.
Yeah.
And actually, it came out a little sooner than we were planning.
Is that right?
We had initially thought that we were going to stay in Winnipeg for another year. And we were in Tofino of last March for spring break, back when we were still allowed to travel. And we were just on the beach one day, and it was March, and April, as you know, are just unbearable months in Winnipeg in the winter that doesn't end. And it's still snowing, and it's been snowing for 8 months. And we had like 1 or 2 days left in our trip, and we were about to sign a lease for a beautiful apartment that we were really excited to move into in Winnipeg. And we were going to stay 1 more year, and then we'll go to Vancouver. And it was just a gorgeous day. And we were on the beach with a couple of friends who live here in Vancouver. And we just said, fuck it. Let's move. And we did. We reached out to the leasing agent, and I already filled out all of the application and everything, and was about to submit it. And he said, you know what? I'm really sorry, but if we were going to stay in Winnipeg, we'd live there, but we're going to move to Vancouver. And she said, I totally get it. I lived there for 20 years. Have fun. And it was a cool moment.
That's awesome. And for just to give some context as well, Joanna and Jade, my wife, know each other because they're both speech language pathologists, and that's how we originally got connected as well, is through them. And what you guys have been in Vancouver for about a year or a little bit over?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
No, maybe 6 months. Although it's hard to tell. Like, this COVID-19 thing is such a time warp. It's like, I don't even, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's last Tuesday or if it's next Thursday. But we moved here at the end of August.
End of August. Okay.
Yeah. And then settled in quite quickly.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you did.
Yeah. And what are like some of the things that you love just about living in Vancouver, and just from West Coast to central part of Canada? What are some of the things that you really, really love out there?
Paying rent. Paying rent here is the best.
Yeah, it's really a premium.
It's a joy. No, but as you said, you get what you pay for. I was joking with a friend who I hadn't talked to in a while from Toronto, and I let him know I had moved here. And he said, holy man, like, isn't the cost of living there just insane? And I kind of thought about it. I'm like, yeah, but it isn't like living the one cost maybe you shouldn't skimp on, like being alive, living. So yeah, I guess the cost of living is insane, but what are the options? Yeah. But no, we lucked out and found a beautiful place in Kitts
Mhm.
2 blocks from the beach.
Mhm.
So we love walking down to the beach. I can walk down on my moccasins in the morning,
Mhm.
still looking like a weirdo because it's not like we're on the beach. So I still got to trek through, two blocks of the city before I get down to the water. But yeah, walking down the beach, catching the sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've
it's
been blessed
beautiful.
with some nice weather now,
Yeah.
thankfully. After like the rumors are true, it rains in Vancouver. You don't have to shovel it, but it rains. It rains a lot.
Yeah.
And it's bearable because now it's a beautiful summer and we're outside to the degree that our governments allow.
Yeah. Yeah. And how has it been with, I know we had chatted a few weeks back and we were lucky enough to come visit you guys a few months ago, kind of right before COVID really broke out. I think that was in February, or it might have been March when we came out to see you guys. And then how has it been, yeah, in Vancouver with COVID, and maybe just more on like a macro and personal level for you guys and for you?
Well, probably like anywhere, it's been eerie how like the city is just ceases to be a city,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and to see it kind of return to life has been really nice. But for me personally, like I work from home generally. When I got into this business, I got rid of the office space, um, and started working from home exclusively, and only using employees or contractors remotely. So it wasn't a huge change there. More of a change for Joanna having to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
But we set up a nice desk in the living room, and you know, yeah. So now it's yeah. I'm not gonna. I don't want to bite my tongue. We'll leave it there. It's been good, man.
Yeah, for sure. And then what sort of things have you guys been able to do outside of like getting outside of the house? What have you guys been able to do to just get through this very strange time that we're living in right now?
Not much,
Yeah.
really. Not when I'm thinking about it. Yeah, not much. Watching more TV than I probably have. Reading more than I have too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Certainly not working more than I ever have.
Yeah. Has
But
working
it's
from
been
has
yeah.
working from home, has working from home changed, like, has it changed a lot for you? Because you were doing it pre-COVID already. Were there big changes that you had to make, or kind of business as usual?
No, I mean, as far as the working life goes, it was business as usual.
Yeah.
I mean, like to give people some context. So in our space, like, we do LED lighting upgrades for industrial properties, mostly manufacturers, and they're pretty capital intensive projects. So capital budgets dried up almost immediately, for any major facilities. Thankfully, we had some work in the pipe, so we were able to ride it out. And I don't know if we're gonna jump right into some business stuff, but maybe one of the one of the most important realizations that I've had that's come out of that I'm grateful for is having our like low fixed costs this time around. In my last business, we would have been done, without a doubt, when we had, say 50 or 60 grand a month of expenses between, warehouse and office and employees and advertising, whatnot. And now it's a dream. It kind of just, yeah, it lets the pressure out of the balloon a bit because we were able to get fixed costs, down to virtually nothing, a couple $1,000 a month, as damage control. And in that kind of environment, you can ride it out, right? You really can. So taking a little more of a conservative approach this time around was something that I'm grateful for, and I think a lesson that I'll take with me, because
Mm-hmm.
we love to look at these events as these like isolated, black swan events. If we like Nassim Nicholas Taleb, but it's not at all, and it pisses off he gets pissed off when people call this a black swan event, because it's not a black swan event at all. Right? Pandemics have been happening forever. They will continue to happen. They're going to happen at an increasing frequency. Now that airplanes are vectors for disease, this shouldn't surprise anyone. Is sort of his take on it. And I think experiencing the first recession really in my career, certainly as a business owner, I don't think in 2008 I even was aware enough to realize what was going on. I was probably seeing how many beers I could drink in a night, and this time around, it's interesting to observe it for the first time, and trying not to be so emotionally attached to the outcome, as difficult as that is. By no means, am I above the regular fear of uncertainty and and ruin that likely everyone is thinking about, particularly business owners.
Mm-hmm. And what you talked a little bit about what your business is now, but going back, what was the business that you ran, or businesses that you've ran in the past?
Yeah, well, the first business that I ever owned was only a few years ago. It was called Manitoba Lighting, and I had fallen into that as a friend owned it. I ended up buying half of it from him, really early on. It was a startup, and we built this thing. It was a rocket ship, but like all rocket ships, it was doomed to fall apart rather quickly. And after learning the other critical lesson that every entrepreneur has to learn once or maybe twice, we didn't have a shareholders agreement that we had actually executed. It was a thing that we had always talked about and we had drafted, but we didn't draft enough to have the intent demonstrated legally. So it really wasn't, in effect, it was non-existent. And that as soon as there was the first sign of trouble, that put us in a tricky situation, because at the moment, at least it felt like this for us, the moment that we started to need a shareholders agreement to rely on to provide some guidelines for what an exit, or just guiding principles for how partnership difficulties might be handled, the moment you need those, it's too late. You can't put it in. So I think I would have even just written, a Crayola contract. I think I think Gavin McInnes calls it. He's a comedian turned provocateur. Just a monster of a man, but he's quite funny. Mm-hmm. And this idea of Crayola contract, like even if it's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that you write in crayon, having that you both sign, that has 3 or 4 things, that 3 or 4 disaster situations that, should they ever arise, you have a plan to exit. And I think that would have been invaluable. Mm-hmm. But instead, we got a lesson.
Yeah,
you learn from lighting piles of money on fire.
Yeah, anything in writing is better than nothing in writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Anything in writing is better than 25 pages of templates that you download and read and re-download and reread and never do anything about.
Yeah, for sure. Crayola, I like that. That's when in doubt, whip out the crayons and draw something up.
Yeah, just do something.
Yeah. Well, actually, this is something that I wanted to dive into a little bit, because I've spoken to a number of people. This has kind of come up from multiple business owners that I've chatted with probably over the last few months, is actually partnerships. And specifically, I think that story is unfortunately not unique to just your situation, but I think pretty common.
How dare you?
I know. And wanted to talk about maybe some takeaways or things aside from the Crayola contract, but things that you would maybe look for or provide insight on for other people that are looking to start a business and maybe partner up with someone. And I have a couple thoughts on this as well, but I want to hear your feedback or suggestions, or some good kind of litmus tests to people out there that want to start a business, and what sort of things they should be looking for before partnering up and signing the dotted line.
I would read the book Simple Numbers. I think I've given you that book. I would start there. I think one of the first chapters talks about owner compensation. And this topic, I'm sure, has been beaten to death by people much more experienced or wise than me. But I think the lesson that I got out of it is that having very clear, you can always revise it, but having very clear expectations about what people will be doing and what they'll be compensated for doing that. Because different roles earn different salary. Like, for example, if you have a partner who's responsible for sales, that person is going to earn, or should at least earn, significantly more than someone who's in operations or not selling, right? What have you? Because it's just a market-based wage approach for ownership, I think, makes a lot more sense. And was something that at the start, at least, we had failed to implement. Where if you're a full-time salesperson in your company, what would you have to pay someone else to do that, that role? And if you don't have the cash, that's fine. You can still track that in terms of sweat equity or something, in the back end of your books. So the company doesn't necessarily have to pay that to you, but it should owe it to you, and it should be documented, because otherwise you're a volunteer and you don't really have a viable business if it's just run on volunteer effort. And it's going to lead to a lot of tension if someone feels the other is earning too much, or one partner feels they're not earning enough. Even if you are doing the roles that you should be doing, right? Even if you're in the right role, if you have one partner who's a great technical co-founder and one who's a great salesperson, great, you're lucky. But those are two very different jobs, and even if the equity split doesn't represent the work that you do on the day-to-day compensation, I think if I partner again, that's something that I would certainly think about more thoughtfully.
Yeah. And so for partnerships, one thing that I've been thinking of, because I actually got approached recently or I just had a conversation with someone about partnerships. And I think one thing that I had mentioned was trying to find out if the other partner is going to be a good fit or not. I mean, you nailed it on the head with, I think, just clear communication and laying out expectations right at the get-go. And then also trying to figure out what the other partner or person's intent is. And I don't know if there's certain questions other than just be like outside of just being direct and being like, why do you want to start this business? But maybe finding ways to draw out, maybe learning about the other person's characteristics and what their intentions are. Because I think one thing that I found interesting during this COVID is that it's been very revealing to see how people are reacting in a time of crisis and shit hitting the fan. That's often when, unfortunately, like some true colors are kind of revealed, and people's real intentions are brought forth. And not to put maybe a potential partner in like some crisis mode and then it's like, oh, that's their intent. But I think just being aware and trying to look for intention, I think, is really important. And I've been listening to quite a bit of Gary Vee lately, and I know he talks a lot about intent. Just he values that really high in terms of hiring people. And I think that is brilliant, because I don't think a lot of employers might look at that or rate that super high, that skill set or value as something that's important. But often it's very, very important, because that's kind of at the core of like what people's like motives are at. Do you think that would have potentially helped you in some sense if like going back looking, and I don't know all the context, but do you think spending some time doing like clear communication and then maybe laying out some intentions in the very early stages might have benefited, or not as much?
I think that idea rests on two assumptions that might prove to be pretty shaky ground. First, that people actually know what their intentions are, right? And then, of course, the caveat that they'd be willing to share them, or that you could actually suss them out whether they share them or not. Because I think, at least in my case, like our intentions individually as business owners changed quite frequently. As I think, I imagine that's common. I don't know that. Maybe our experience was a little closer to the extreme end of that, having a high degree of flexibility in those intentions, perhaps just because of our character. But I think, yeah, knowing what your intention is one thing, but then the second assumption that the intentions don't change, right? Like I think that might be really difficult, or at least I think we would have had a difficult time. That said, had we put those intentions down on paper, it likely still would have been a great starting place. And if they changed, putting them down on paper again, likely would have saved a lot of legal bills.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, having something to lean back on, right? Just to have like some certainty, right? Because it's always uncertain, and the realm of any startup is such an uncertain one, and anywhere you can add just an ounce of certainty is invaluable. In my experience, my short, meager experience, but it's been a wild one.
Mm-hmm. And you came from your previous company also had up to how many employees?
We had 10.
10.
We had 10 at the peak. Yeah, probably like a year and a half in.
Yeah.
So we scaled up way too fast. Ultimately, we kind of wanted to take over the world and started a second company about a year in, maybe a year and a half, with the idea of starting BC Lighting out in BC, because I wanted to live here at some point, and I knew that. Mm-hmm. And by taking, we sort of hired the team, and we had a GM in place and a sales team and a marketing person and an admin and a project manager, and all of this. Just in our own naivety, we thought that it would just work. Like, great, team's in place, let's go start BC Lighting, we'll do it again. And maybe 4 or 5 months later, right, we had lit like $300,000 on fire, and in salaries, and had no sales coming in, and it was it was shocking, right? So like, okay, so yeah, that war chest of cash is gone, and now we have to figure out what the hell we're going to do. And then it puts the pressure on.
Yeah. What has helped you in making difficult decisions as a business owner? And I realize that's kind of vague, but I imagine that you have to make quite a lot of difficult decisions that you probably don't want to make. Maybe that's like letting staff go or whatever, fill in the blank. But what sort of things have you learned or has helped you in like making really tough decisions?
The lesson that keeps reappearing as far as making difficult decisions goes is this idea of like trusting instinct and gut. Because I think that's like a way older part of the brain than, our prefrontal cortex, where we try to rationalize and think our way out of all these solutions that, like, intuitively we probably already know. We don't know why. We might want to take a year explaining this or building some story around why we feel a certain way before we act on it. But in my experience, my gut has been right way more often than I gave it credit for. And I'm trying to trust that a lot more, even though it's a total shot in the dark, like everything, right? Like, we never know. There's no answers, even right. The people in the books we read or the people we see on TV, everybody's just kind of floundering around, bumping into walls. And I think just remembering that, and if you let your gut, you know, guide you as to which walls to bump into, maybe maybe in the long run, those decisions will solve a lot of those problems before they become problems.
So how do you listen to that?
Well, I don't. That's yeah. That's why it keeps reappearing. Yeah, but yeah. I don't know. If you figured out, let me know, because that's yeah.
I don't know what your gut is saying, so you just gotta
if you figure out the answer, if you figure out how to trust it, I think it's just paying. It's those small signals that that we all get. Whether it's your conscience, call it whatever you want. There are certain things that feel right, not in a hedonistic way or not in terms of like satisfying the ego, but something about it feels right. Whether it's a moral stance or a good decision that's good for you and the people around you. And it's often not the easy thing in my experience. And maybe that's why I've had so many difficult encounters with it. It probably is the harder, more difficult, maybe it's a difficult conversation that you want to avoid, or, the decision that's a lot of work, but there's something about it that, that instinctually feels right. And I'm trying to do a better job of heeding that siren, but baby steps.
Well, similarly, I think you and Joe listened to it in moving.
And you're totally right. And we were actually reflecting about that just I don't know, a week or two ago. And in terms of the COVID quarantine, like, had this happened, maybe we wouldn't have moved to Vancouver at all. And we're already so grateful we did. Like, it was certainly the right decision for us. I think that we're in a great spot, and you probably feel the same. Like, I think, you, like, at the moment you got out west, for you, it was the right decision. And I think you knew that, right? And it may have taken you guys a while, but the same thing for you guys. Like, you made a snap decision, and all of a sudden I remember getting a text from you, or maybe it was Jade who texted Joanna and just said, "Hey, we're moving to BC." Like, oh, we're selling our house and moving. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, and it was quick, but actually we had a very similar experience to you guys, where it was 2 years ago. We also went to Tofino on vacation, and we've gone two times. We've gone 2 times to Tofino, and it is like paradise. It is heaven on earth.
There's something in the air there, right? It's like, you can't, like, not to get like mystical or spiritual or too like woo-woo about it, but there's something about that place that's just magic, and you get it, and you walk out on the beach there. It's just like, there's something about it.
Yeah, it is a magical place, and we've gone twice. And the last time we went, we went in the summertime, and it was just so beautiful. And then, so we kind of already had imagined in our minds, oh man, BC is really nice. We had considered Tofino, but the tough thing with Tofino is real estate and finding a place to live, and work is both are kind of scarce. So
all those little things.
And there's too many big roadblocks or barriers that would have had to taken a lot of work to move them out of the way to make it happen. And then when we came out to the Okanagan, I'd say 2 or 3 times over the past 3 years. And last summer, we also did a trip out here, and we were just like, oh man, this is really nice. Like, this is a nice lifestyle. Like, people actually live like this out here. That's amazing. Like, we have
those moments all the time too, man. Like, you're just like, I can't believe we live like this. Like, we live here. Yeah. Because it just always seemed like a vacation, like an impossibility. Like, how, like, people actually live here. It's bizarre.
Year round.
Yeah. It's bizarre, right? Like, it's still like, it still is like a strange dream. Like, like, you step outside, like, what is this? Like, the trees the trees have flowers instead of leaves, and mint grows between the cracks in the sidewalks. It's just it's bizarre. It's Candyland.
It is. And we actually had kind of two choices for us to move out to BC. It was either going to be over Christmas, this past December, over Christmas holidays, or wait until June next month once the school year ended and then move out then. And had we had not moved when we did and waited, we probably wouldn't be out here. We wouldn't be moving out anywhere. We'd be stuck in Winnipeg until COVID died down, and work would have been totally different. And I'm so glad that we were able to move when we did. And yeah, it was very weird, and there's some negatives to moving to a new city and not knowing that many people are getting out to meet new people.
Yeah, particularly when it's illegal to be within 10 feet of somebody, right?
Yeah, there's that. And now would have been the time that we would have started joining, like I would have joined a soccer team or a rock climbing group or whatever, and start getting into the community. I think we've done a really good job, and we've joined some organizations and have started to meet people through ways that we can, which has been great. But I don't know, I guess in our gut we just were like, yeah, let's just do it now as opposed to doing something later.
So what about that though? Like, unpack that a bit. Like, how did you know in your gut? Like, what made it seem, or like what was the final kind of the final penny that tipped the balance and made you guys in your gut know that this was the time?
Well, there was definitely, Jade got a really great job opportunity. So that was a huge domino that was tipped and made it that much easier to move. It's hard to articulate and like wrestle with trying to verbalize your gut. It's just a feeling. But if I had to try and unpack it, and not overcomplicate it, and keeping things like simple, I think just the lifestyle change was. Winnipeg's a great city, but
As they say, everything before the bud is bullshit.
Exactly. But it is.
And I love it too, so I'm allowed to say that. Nobody else can talk shit about our city.
That's right. We are the greatest shit talkers of our own city.
Yeah, no one else is allowed to talk smack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, our town.
No, it's a great city, but I find that it is too comfortable sometimes. And the things that you can do in Winnipeg are go out to eat, and great food culture, lots of amazing restaurants. But lifestyle wise, we love spending time out in nature. I forget who said it, like in Winnipeg, you want to have a bigger house, which you can afford, because you spend half the year inside your house. And whereas you can live in other places in the world in very small amount of space because you're out, even New York City, right? You like 300 micro loft square feet apartments is fine because you're in New York and you're not going to spend a lot of time inside. You're going to go outside. You're going to explore the city, whatever.
Yeah. Unless it's March, April, May, or June 2020, then you're going to get to know that apartment pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another layer of.
But that's again, it's like an exception to the rule.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just think, out here you can, your space can be a lot less, and then outside it is a candy land. It's absolute paradise. I feel like Jade and I were talking about this earlier today because we went for a hike, that we're in this weird kind of like episode of Black Mirror, like we're here, we're living here, but there's all this craziness going on with like the world and like how the communities are and cities are like functioning right now, and it just feels like we're in some sort of simulation. It's weird. It's just weird. So, but anyways, we're happy to be in this simulation. Wouldn't have it any other way. That's that.
Yeah, you're going to be stuck in one regardless, so you might as well be in the one you choose.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to the one that chooses you.
Yeah. I think one thing though that I have been and I don't know, maybe I've practiced this muscle more than I don't know, not to compare. Maybe I've just practiced this muscle quite a bit, is, a lot of people are afraid of making big changes, whether that's change your job, whether that's, I don't know, be in a different relationship, move, like big stuff, out of fear. But I am more afraid of stagnant, like mediocrity than I am, and like comfort. Like I don't, there's something to sure being comfortable, but I would rather go the route of that's a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to lean into that as opposed to go the opposite direction, because usually a little bit of that unknown, there's going to be something once you dip your toes into it that's probably going to surprise you and not be as fearful as you think it is.
Yeah, exactly. The anticipation
Yeah.
of anything is always worse than the outcome.
Yeah. I read a book over last year, and actually it was around the time that we were talking about
it takes
moving.
me about a year to read a book too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was called The War of Art. Not the art of war, but
I know it.
You know it?
I haven't read it, but I just bought it.
Okay. It's an amazing book, and he spends quite a bit of time, like 50, 70 pages. It's an easy read, short, a little bit over 100 pages, but he spends about 70 pages talking about fear, and he defines fear in many different ways. And one thing he talks about is the more fear you have towards something, or resistance, that's something that could probably be higher on your list of like, it's a big priority, so you should tackle that first. Kind of like, what is the leading domino that's going to erase, Tim Ferriss talks about making the one decision that'll eliminate 99 others. And sometimes that one big domino has the most amount of opposition, so you want to actually tackle that first. So anyways, I love that book, and I kind of keep that in mind now. If I kind of check myself, if I am starting to feel uncomfortable about a decision that I have to make, and it's like, and maybe I'm procrastinating or putting it off, but if it keeps coming back, it's like kind of the intuition in the back of my head that's just saying, do it, just do it. You'll feel better once this is done and you've tackled it head on.
Yeah, but that's that gut thing.
Yeah.
Right. That's that feeling like there's something about it that you're avoiding.
Yeah.
Right. But you've found a way to sprint through it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What made you start your very first business?
Well, the very first one I didn't start. Right. My former partner had started it a few months before I joined and partnered in. But and that one was just opportunity, right? It was the same industry largely, but he had recognized an opportunity, and I saw the opportunity there as well. I think that comes with a certain amount of danger, right? We've discussed this quote before, as opposed to like, instead of thinking about a product or service that the world needs, right? Think about what would make you feel alive and do that, because what the world needs is people who've come alive. I think it's a Henry Thurman, or anyway, that idea. I think it's dangerous to just pursue opportunity, because you'll end up where I think I was, not long ago, where maybe to a degree still am, where like I've got a objectively pretty good business, right? I understand it pretty well. It's simple. Fixed costs are low. As soon as I imagine soon we'll return to profitability, but in the meantime, it's not going to, it's not going to kill us. So we can wait it out. But I think you end up in this sort of spot where something about it isn't meaningful, right? Like for this journey to be sustainable, and I'm sure I think you'd agree, like there's got to be something more than just money, unless money is a good enough motivator for you. Because then what I found is, like, in moving to BC, like I think 5 years ago, I would have made a list of all these things that I wanted to have, right, or achieve, and those would be those would be the requirements for happiness, right? And having now checked those boxes, right, it's like, incredible relationship that I'm grateful for, and living in the city that is probably my first pick in the world, at least at this point. I don't I wanted to be here. I wanted to be my own boss, per se. I ultimately own my time, and then be at least financially secure enough to not worry about paying bills, or about basic day-to-day stuff. And having gotten there, and this is where your idea of comfort, I think, is can be can make you the victim of achieving your own goal, right? Because now it's like what is the driver, right? Because if it's no longer just money, right, and business can so quickly become one-dimensional like that, like it's just the pursuit of profit, and it certainly was not that's not a sustainable pursuit for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'm alone in that. Like, I'm not Mother Teresa, right? I don't think, like, I think everybody probably needs to connect to something a little deeper. And if your business is going to consume a large part of your life, as it's probably going to,
Mm-hmm.
if you choose to go this route, if it's not something that you connect with on a level beyond, right, beyond the dollars and cents of it, then you'll start to feel pretty uninspired. I mean, I did.
Yeah, three things come to mind actually really recently. The first is a quote from Jim Carrey, and he says, "I wish everyone got as much money and fame as they wanted, and then realize that that's not the answer to happiness."
I love that. Yeah.
Right? And he would know. I mean, and then the second thing is actually, so I've been doing over the last 2 weeks a daily vlog where I record myself on my phone for
That just sounds so uncomfortable to me. Like, just the thought of having to do that.
Yeah, for 10 to 20 minutes, and I share thoughts that have been going on in my mind that day, or things that are just, in my head, and I'm getting them out. And yes, it is uncomfortable, and it's weird to just talk into your phone because you don't get that instant feedback until I post it. And I've been sharing it on my YouTube channel, on LinkedIn, which I think people would be like, why are you sharing that on LinkedIn? Like, that's like a professional network. And I talk about why I shared that in one of my videos on LinkedIn. But one day, one of my videos, I talk about this thought experiment that popped into my head, and it was a thought experiment, and I titled it, "What do you want?" And I was just thinking, I don't know, before bed, I think the night before, I wrote down just in my phone a list of things that I want. Okay. So I started with the more materialistic things. And then as I got further and further down the list, it came to be more of the things that I actually want, right? Because at first it's like, I want money. Okay, cool. And then
all the Beanie Babies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Either one.
totally. All the holographic Pokemon cards. Got
Yes.
those collections down.
Totally. But usually it's the things that first come into your mind of like what you want that um sometimes is like just more dreams, or like, yeah, like, I don't know, a Lamborghini. Sweet. Yeah, that would be awesome. But every time I imagined that thing on my list, I imagined getting it right away, instantly. So I want a Lamborghini. Okay, there it is. It's out in my driveway. I imagined $2 million. Okay, I got that. Then what's next, right? I kept going, and I kept peeling away the layers, and by the seventh time, the seventh list on my item, it was um more spending time outside, and it was enriching relationships with people, and it was things that I could a lot like easily attain, and it was cheaper, and I was like, oh well, this is
And
I'm just gonna
ironically, it's probably the things that you do anyway. It's probably exactly what you're doing,
yeah, yeah,
right?
and
Yeah,
and
like you
so
already have those things, dummy.
yeah, totally. And so I was just like, oh, okay, well, I'm just gonna keep going that route. And um anyways, that was like just a thought experiment that I thought.
That's a really cool. That's a really cool experiment. I could see that because by actually trying to like put yourself in the situation where you have it and visualize that. Because like then what? Like okay, great. Dean wants a Lamborghini and it's in the driveway. Okay,
Mhm.
he goes for a drive. That was fun, right? Like now what? Like what is the thing really doing for you? And then because really you'd probably be sitting in your room doing exactly what you're doing now, right? Like the Lamborghini just happens to be in the driveway. Because what do you do? Drive the fucking thing 20 hours a day? You're going to lose interest in that so quickly. And I think as soon as you pretend you have it, that's pretty neat. Okay, do you remember your third thing? But
Oh man, I could.
if you have it, I want to interject because you said two of the three. You said the Jim Carrey thing. You said this other exercise.
Oh, third thing
You
was
had a third thing.
real estate.
Ah,
And that's something that I think I will continuously want over time, up to a point when I don't want to manage a bunch of real estate, and then I'll just sell it off as kind of like that'll be my long-term investment, and then I can just sell them off and live off the money that I've made in real estate. um Third thing
yeah,
was
Dean. I
real
think
estate.
that's a really cool. I think for anybody who is pursuing the entrepreneurial journey, like it doesn't come with a lot of security, right? And we know that. And at least in my experience, like I have a couple of small little real estate investments as well.
Mhm.
I kind of like my strategy early on was to just live paycheck to paycheck ultimately by buying by having bought assets, so like still stretching myself out so I didn't have as much money to waste. I still wasted the little money I did have, don't get me wrong, but this idea of buying assets instead of things, right? And still living pretty tight, so like it wasn't particularly comfortable. But now like I have a couple of properties that are tenanted and are paying themselves off, and in 25 years, right, like if everything goes sideways and I never make a dollar in any of my businesses, great, like at least I still have a retirement, or worse yet, I have a place to live. And I think that real estate, like there's something profound about the simplicity of that for someone who's pursuing, the journey that you and I are. We're like, okay, well, everything else goes to shit. At least I have, I have something, and it's relatively safe and secure. And that has brought me some peace of mind, and I think has enabled me to take other risks.
Mhm. Totally. I would
Yeah.
rather, I don't know, I would rather invest money in real estate on under $1 million on in a real estate deal than I would investing $1,000 in the stock market.
Yeah. I've lost money on every single stock I've ever bought.
Hmm.
Like if I buy a single stock, it's just a guarantee. It's just a matter of how much I'm going to lose, and when. But with all the real estate stuff, like whether it was, doing private lending, where like taking out a line of credit and then basically like leveraged investing and lending it to someone who's going to flip or develop houses. Did that for a bit. That worked out really well. Those things with like really predictable, simple cash flows. Like, okay, he's going to pay you 1% a month on whatever you give, and it's just going to be a check, and it's physical and you can feel it, right? As opposed to this esoteric kind of stock market thing that you really have to be good at, I think. And I'm just not, right? Like I studied business, I studied finance, I have a decent idea of how markets work, but like you're sitting down at a poker table against pros.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people forget that, right? If you want to play the stock market, I think that for the average person, like buying the index or Wealthsimple or whatever is going to prove to be a much better strategy just in its simplicity, because I'm going to buy a stock because someone, a friend tells me to buy it and he's been reading all about it and he knows it. And then I'm going to buy it, maybe $500,000, again, it's not going to kill me to lose it. And then he's going to sell it because he knows what's coming. And then he's not maliciously, but he'll probably forget to tell me to sell it because, I only put $500,000 or whatever. And then I'm going to lose all of my money or 60% of it. And then once you've lost 60 or 70%, you're just like, fuck it, you let it ride. Right. Like, what do you're not going to, at that point, you're going to let it ride to zero. At least that's my philosophy. So yeah, the real estate game has been a much better complement to the entrepreneurial journey, I think, even on the small scale, right? Like, you don't need much, in Canada, especially in Winnipeg, right? Like the first condo I bought, like I had to put $10,000 down. It's a beautiful new condo, one of those converted lofts in that really old, beautiful part of Winnipeg called the Exchange District. And it's tenanted. It's cash flowing. It was cash flowing right away. Like it really doesn't. You don't need that much money to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the risks there are much more manageable. Like, people think entrepreneurs are crazy risk takers, and I just disagree. They're actually much better at trying to calculate risk and manage risk than taking crazy risk.
Yeah, they're able to actually mitigate the downside of risk.
Yeah, for sure. And it's much more holistic, right? Like, risk isn't just financial. Like, you can, like, the idea of like, okay, great. Well, real estate's a great hedge against a recession or inflationary periods generally, as long as you're buying and holding. But then the non-material risk of like, okay, if everything about my life goes backwards, I got a place to live. Right? Like, awesome. Like that. And that's a great hedge against all the other risks you're taking in other areas of your life.
Totally. I think I heard the story of Richard Branson when he started out Virgin Airways. He was actually able to work out a deal with Boeing that if Virgin didn't take off, he was actually able to return. I think he bought 100 747 jets or something like that. And so it wasn't risky for him because he was able to strike a deal and mitigate his downside. And I think this is me personally talking about the stock market and why I would not invest or be comfortable investing $1,000 in the stock market, because I don't know enough about the game. So, using the analogy of poker, I don't know the rules of the game enough to know how to play it well. And what I do know of the game scares me away from even wanting to try and learn it.
Yeah, and that's why you still have money to pay rent.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, I don't know,
Yeah.
I've heard of, like the movies that come out, and I forget which one either just came out or is about to come out, and it's based on a true story, and these guys from, I think, Boston dug something like, I don't even know how many hundreds of miles of they laid down, I don't know if it was like wire or something to connect to New York to the stock market so that they could get a fraction of a second quicker for doing trades. and that resulted in a stupid amount of money because they were able to actually make trades
Totally. And then there's dummies
faster.
like you and I who are trading on CIBC Investors Edge or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you want you want to play against those guys?
exactly.
Like
No,
that's
no, I
like
don't.
absolutely not. I don't. But like nothing. The balanced portfolio idea of investing in the really long term is a great idea, right? Saving money, great.
Yeah.
But uh, yeah, playing. I've had nothing. I've had nothing, and I still do it occasionally. Like I never learned this lesson, but I do it in smaller and smaller increments, right? Like, but I think like it really is gambling for for people like me and apparently you.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Totally. I'm gonna take a left turn here and ask you about, I don't know where this might go, but what is your definition of friendship?
Hmm.
Or
Just
where did
trust.
it trust?
Yeah, I think that's it. And another lesson that keeps reoccurring in business is this idea of trust and just how valuable that is, right? Like there are lots of great moral people of high, integrity out there, and choosing to do business with those people instead of the others. And again, it's a gut thing. And I'm seeing this a lot, even just recently in reflecting on it, where the business relationships that I've had a good gut feeling about from day one in the gut, and usually it wasn't necessarily that profitable for me, like at least at the outset, right? Like pursuing the help instead of the cash, or just like, there's just something about the gut as opposed to the relationship where like, wow, this is a great business decision making this partnership. I don't like the guy as much, or whatever. Like, there's just something about it. Like you're not going to come right out and say, you can tell he's unethical, say, right? But there's just something, right? There's something there that that gives you that, just that ounce of hesitation. And I think choosing to partner with those people, and the way that like that aligns with friendship, I think it is much the same. Like this trust, where like the answer is yes. I've got this one of my closest friends. Um, we've done a bit of real estate stuff together. You know, uh, he's invested in my companies. He's loaned me money before, right? Like if I needed something to make a deal happen, and it would sound crazy, right, for someone to just like go to the bank and just send their friend 50 grand, just like no paper, no, right, like no, but that level of trust, like I think that's the thing, because he just knows that I would never not pay him back. Like if I lost all of his money in my business, let's say, like
Mm-hmm.
there's just no way I would ever pay myself before I paid him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that like that level of trust, when you just know it, it's in the gut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I heard a good definition of it was a similar question. It was like, what do you think friendship means to you? And someone said, great friends are ones that remind you of who you are when you might have forgotten. I thought that was pretty good, and that was applicable to their journey. And I'm wondering, outside of trust, what other values you deem important in the people that you want to surround yourself with.
I think being interesting,
Hmm.
ultimately, like the sort of like anything but vanilla kind of,
Hmm.
like the freaks and weirdos. Like I like those. Like I like to be surprised,
Hmm.
right? And I'm like the eclectic. Like I'm not an incredibly eclectic person, but I really appreciate that, like things that are just odd, and that people who surprise you in what they say or do, you know, and it's kind of playful, but there's some element of kind of, yeah, freaks and weirdos where you just, it just makes it more fun, you know, and there's like that, just that little degree of profundity, you know, where you're like, oh yeah, like that was really, like, that's kind of interesting. And you think about it later, like, you know, you're like laying in bed by yourself laughing, you know, like if you're replaying a tape through your head of your friend and you're laughing out loud, right, to yourself, you know, looking like a certifiably insane person, just erupting with laughter. And that's such a great sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, actually, talking about art, you do have a musical background.
a bit. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. By no means am I good, but,
well,
but I certainly like it.
what what do you get from music? What does like music mean to you?
It's a great balance against the business world where I think it can so quickly and commonly be reduced to numbers. Whereas music is this thing that there's really nothing, like, musicians can barely make ends meet, right? Like, they're just doing this thing because they can't not do it. And I just admire that, right? Like it doesn't make any sense for them to do what they do, right? Logically, but that's the beauty of it, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense, you know. Like, yeah, they're like, they will sit there for 10 hours practicing something that will be, you know, demonstrated for 3 minutes on stage, right? And just like having if you can stick with that, like, if there's something about that that's got you glued to that effort, I think that's where it is, right? And we can apply it to anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing. I think that's what I love so much about it, is that there's just something you can't quite explain about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all had that experience, you know, at a concert or a music festival or whatever, listening to a song, you know, late one night, where just something happens, right? There's just some little shift, some little realization. It's usually subtle, you know, maybe like analogous to meditating, for those who are patient enough to have stuck with it long enough to have it. Like, it's such a subtle shift. It's so profound and so impactful, but it's so subtle, like, you almost don't notice it. And I think that the same sort of applies to music and all things in the realm of art, with things you can't explain. And I just love that, because I think it adds a level of irrationality that is a really nice complement to the business space, where we can over rationalize and tend to only value things that are rational. And in my experience, that just got boring, you know, and it's something I'm still wrestling with today.
Totally. I think business owners could play more.
And I think it should be playful.
Yeah.
Right. It absolutely should. And this is something that I'm working on right now. I know you're really good at this, Dean. Like, for some reason, like, you don't have this inhibition that I do. And I think a lot of others do. Like, for example, like, taking a vlog for you is mildly uncomfortable. Like, for me, like, that's something I just, at this point, I could never get over the fear of doing, you know, and just like putting that out there, whatever it is. Like, I don't know what the reason is yet, of why I resist that. But for some reason, like, that's just a sandbox that you're comfortable playing in, and like, look how much fun it is for you.
Yeah. And actually, and I haven't vocalized this yet, but one of the things that
Good.
have, I came across, I think it might have been a TikTok video, which is hilarious, but yeah, I think it was. And it was somebody recording this guy who probably isn't like blown up or famous, but they were talking about, I think it was on leadership and people that are in politics and I don't know, maybe popular people on social media platforms. And they were talking about the people who speak up and vocalize tend to sometimes gather around those people. And sometimes those people are on the fringes, the extremes, right? That's why, like, I have trouble sometimes, and maybe that's been a fear of mine on sharing content on social media platforms, is that now everyone has a voice and they can just throw shit at you digitally, and you're throwing it at real people. And I don't know how much of it is bots and real people and whatever, but the point that this guy was making is that a lot of loud people are the ones that are getting the attention. And I mean, algorithms probably play a part as well as to like what people are showing. Like, I mean, Trump's your perfect example of just like someone who's just loud, vomits all the time, but like, look how much attention he gets. Look how much publicity he gets. Look how much time people spend talking about this ridiculous human. And the point of his message is that the quiet people are usually the ones that are sitting back, they're taking it all in, they're thinking, and they're not speaking up enough. And I'm a fan of Simon Sinek as well, and he was talking about be the last to speak. And he, you know, when you're in a boardroom with people, listen to everyone's point of views and then be the last one to speak. While I love that, the people that I really like and listen to as well, on top of Simon Sinek, are people like Gary Vee. He will interrupt people right away. And often he's cutting through the
Yeah, he's
bullshit.
always the last to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. He's cutting through the bullshit, getting straight to the point and not beating around the bush. But he is putting out a lot of stuff out there. And I mean, Joe Rogan, like, I love the Joe Rogan experience. One of the reasons why I started my podcast was through listening to him. But he's just like, you know, he's got so much to say, and he says everything sometimes to a point where it's just like, it's insurmountable, the amount of content that he's produced. Like, I can't digest all of it. But I thought, okay, you know what? I have more things that I want to say. I'm going to start saying them. I'm going to start being more out there and putting myself out there more, because,
Yeah, so, but how did you do that?
well,
Like,
one,
how did you like, what was the actual process of starting that? Like, is it baby steps? Is it all at once? Like, how did you just, because I think we'd all benefit from that. You know, like every time I, you know, show an ounce of vulnerability, I'm always, you know, paid back with a pound of silver. And I still have trouble doing it. And I'm sure
yeah,
most of us do.
yeah. I think for when I started the podcast, I think I originally started the blog, which was simple to understand. That came first, and I just wanted to share some thoughts and get them out there. And blogging was pretty easy. It was easy to set up a website, write an article, post,
And did you
get
put
it
your
out
name
there.
on that?
I did. Yeah. And I think I just wanted to learn how to write better. And I also had some really like interesting projects in college that I thought this would be really good to just like publish and share. And I've always been a fan of public transportation. I've always been fascinated with just how cities get large groups of people to navigate from point A to point B. And so I had a lot of thoughts and experience traveling to different cities and actually um, trying different modes of transportation in different countries. And Winnipeg's very behind the times in terms of public transport. And it was just something that I thought, I have some good thoughts on this. I had written a project in college on improving the public transportation system in Winnipeg.
Sure.
And my professor said, you should bring this across the street because it was the downtown campus and City Hall was right across the street. And he said, this like, give this to the city. Like, this is a really good idea. And so I don't know, I had some confidence, I guess, from validation from others on like that one topic or area that I felt comfortable sharing. Because I think what was being shared or done didn't make any sense to me. And sometimes out of frustration or pain or in a bad space, you just like are like, okay, enough. I'm gonna just put out this solution. If you want something done, just do it yourself, kind of thing. And I guess the blogging helped give me some confidence to then start a podcast. But I didn't know what I was doing when I started a podcast, but I just thought what I was missing too at the time was in like rich relationships. And I really envied Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss because I could just blatantly see how much joy it brought them getting to talk to these amazing people for an hour and a half to 3+ hours and being immersed in digital marketing and social media and how much screen time people were spending. I thought, no wonder they're so happy. They're spending time with other people, real people, building real relationships while everyone else is tweeting.
Yeah, bingo.
Right? So it was obvious to me that this was a fun platform that was a low cost barrier to enter. And I could start with reaching out to friends and people that I knew.
And then eventually you could work your way up to the heavyweights like myself.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. You nailed it. You nailed it. And it's just been so enriching. I'm also an extrovert and I get energy from when I talk to people. And so it was also like the podcast just it fit me very well because it gave me energy, as well as enriching relationships with other people. And I like to learn. I'm curious. I'm a curious person. I want to know what makes people tick, right? I'm like, and I like that about Joe Rogan. He just, and I like how he was able to look at things objectively and disagree and be able to have a conversation with someone. It taught me a lot. Whereas you don't learn anything when you're on the news or watching the news, right? Because the conversation is so not natural. It's like, oh, tell me about this. And they put on a face and they got all this makeup
15
on. 15 seconds. And then you get a short snippet answer. And then it's like, oh yeah, let's dive into that a little bit more. You get 10 more seconds. And it's like, okay, thanks. All right. Weather person or whatever. And it's on to commercials or whatever. And it's just, there's no substance there. And it's just so not enjoyable and not how I want to spend time digesting information. So I really like that longer format. So that's why I did the podcast. And then these vlogs, the thought of doing it made me uncomfortable. So I did it.
That's crazy. But like, so what's the aim there? Like, do you see it as being something that is commercially useful for you, or is it just an artistic pursuit?
I hope. Well, it's definitely artistic. There's multiple reasons. One is what I learned through podcasting and will continuously learn. Like I'm always learning. Each podcast I learn something, but I've picked up speech tics, words that whenever you re-listen to yourself in audio, sometimes it can be like nails on a chalkboard and you're like, oh God, I sound like that. Oh man, I say this word too much or whatever. So you learn a lot about communication through just trial and error and just practicing. So I really like that for doing an audio podcast. And then I thought I'm going to do a video because then I can watch myself
Huh.
and then I can see how I carry myself. You know, where's my eye contact? Am I looking into, and it's tougher through Zoom in that because I'm looking at you, which you're in the middle of my screen,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
should be
Instead of the
looking
camera. Sure.
exactly, but I should be
Yeah.
looking at you through the camera, but then I can't see your reaction at the same time. So it's a little
Yeah.
bit of a disconnect there, but I can record myself for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And I'm curious about how I carry myself so that I can improve my mannerisms, my speech.
But
Um,
ultimately, why? What do you think's the driver of that?
um,
Like, is it just vanity?
no, I was actually going to say it's internal. It's not external. I'm not looking for, I'm not doing it for the likes or to get, even to make money. That was never an intent. And I've never made a single cent doing podcasts or vlogs or anything. It's been,
Yeah, you've achieved all of your financial goals as they pertain to podcasting and vlogging
yeah,
because
yeah,
you did.
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, it wasn't for any financial gain. My my intent, my intentions were to build relationships, learn personal communication skills, and then um also learn skills that could help me in marketing as well. Like I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with different businesses or organizations and I can confidently say now, hey, you, or if I'm involved, we should start a podcast or we should start uh, a vlog now because I've tasted it a little bit and then I can replicate that professional. So like the skill set that I've learned from it can also be duplicated in a professional setting if
Sure.
if I want to. So it's, you know, learning a new skill set, which is good. Um, so a it's a plus both personally and professionally.
Yeah. And then to round that out, I think you touched on curiosity. And I think that is still one of the most underrated attributes as it, as it pertains to the cliched sense of success and also just living a rich life.
Mhm.
A curious mind, like a curious mind is never bored, right? A curious mind is never that idle, always wandering, right? But never idle, and maybe that little degree of restlessness is so useful.
Totally. Absolutely. Um, yeah, curiosity and gut. I think that's definitely two key takeaways from this conversation. I think that's super valuable for other people that listen. Um, I think the nice thing too that in I mentioned two things, and I said I was going to mention. This is circling way back
Yeah,
earlier in
yeah.
the
You said a third thing.
conversation.
You never did.
So the third thing, because you had mentioned earlier about the first business that you didn't start but you joined, it was because of opportunity. And one thing, so I just shared my vlog yesterday, and it was on my recommendation on listening to Frank Sinatra during COVID and drop shipping. And I talk a little bit in the beginning about how I typically read books, you know, similar to you about self-help, entrepreneurship, bettering oneself, yada, yada, yada. And then even when I'm browsing or looking online, it's somewhat business related. And so I get a lot of ads or my TikTok videos or, you know, inspiration or whatever. And I've got a lot of drop shipping businesses, these influencers or micro influencers or no ones that apparently are making, you know, like the average Joes are marketing themselves and they're making 10 to 30 grand a month. And it's easy, it's quick cash, and all you have to do is set up a Shopify business and in a very short amount of time. You can make a lot of money. But circling back to what we started talking about earlier about intention, yes, there's an opportunity there, but I talk about how if there's no passion, or if it's not aligned with some sort of personal interest, then it's probably going to fizzle out. It's not going to be long lasting. And I also talk about the true economic cost of starting a business that might be lucrative, but so what? It goes back to the things that you really want. And do you stop to think about, okay, you've made 100 grand in 6 months selling t-shirts or discs for disc golf because you picked that niche, but there's no passion. You're no less happier than you were when you didn't have this business. And now what? Right? So I don't know. I guess the point is kind of like Simon Sinek's find your why, and aligning business with, business can give you a lot of things, but it should give you life. I think anything that you pursue should excite you in some way and give you life. And I've been saying it in that specific sense because I think although happiness is important and you should have that along the route, like along the road, I think it's just an ephemeral feeling that will fade away like all things. So, but excitement or something that gives you life, I think you'll be able to stick through things. And like this podcast, I'm going to do it until it no longer gives me life. This vlog, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to keep doing it because personally, I get the benefits outweigh the cons, and I really enjoy it, and it gives me some sort of zest, and I have the time to do it right now during this weird time, and share things that I think hopefully others will find valuable. So, but I think intention and that excitement piece has to be underscored, because too many people are talking about the get rich quick scheme, and there is more to life than that. If you pay attention to the people that have achieved great success, they're kind of saying that in different ways. And that's what I'm trying to also.
Yeah. So how do you think then all of us could be more playful in our business pursuits, or even just in general, like applying some level of play as being sort of like a process goal, because it's fun as you go. Start there. Like, how do you think we could be more playful?
Okay, so how could we be more playful? One, I think that you need to fail more. I think you need to decondition how we've been brought up, how we've been conditioned. You go through school and you're given a grade letter, and if it's not up to a standard, then you are, it's got a negative attribute to it, and it's a fail. Like F is failure, and that's the worst grade that you can get, and that's not good. So I think that fail more, but I think Tim Ferriss has a really good example of one fear. He gives these fear setting examples, and one of them that I've done a few times is go to a public space. Might not be good to do during COVID now that I think of it, but go to a public space and just lay down for a period of time, and then just get up and then just like continue walking or whatever. And I've done that, and it's just getting comfortable with doing something uncomfortable, right? So I think at a micro level, share a thought, share an idea with someone else and see what their response is. I think spending some time by yourself is really helpful. I think listening, like learning about the ego is really important. I read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle when I was like 18 or something. And that was the first time that I had ever really thought about my ego. And I thought, this is like really interesting, just the way that he defines it and just how it shed insight into how I interact with other people and gave me some insight into being hopefully a little bit more empathetic towards other people's situation. And it's their ego. It might not be them or what their true self is. It's just their ego that's, at the forefront. But if you spend some time learning about your ego, then hopefully you can start testing it and just like, and there's a difference between like ego and like your gut, right? And so I think trying to understand what your ego is and when to like, I don't know, I don't know. I think of like my ego as like a little kid that if it's hurt or whatever, I'm just like, it's okay. Like, you're gonna be okay. You'll be fine. It's okay. Like, don't take it so personally. It's not you. Or what can we learn from that? And then let's like grow and move forward. I also think volunteering is really important, and spend some time with people that have less than you. And if you spend
That's interesting.
if you spend time with people that have various different types of disabilities. I volunteered like in high school with Special Olympics, and we used to go bowling every other Wednesday. And they were so playful and they were so real. I loved how raw and real and honest they were. They would tell you exactly what they thought. They would act how they wanted to act. There's no ego there. And I just loved it.
Interesting.
Like, oh, this is great. And like,
yeah, it's much more authentic.
yeah. And like some people would, maybe be cautious about like laughing. I would never say laugh at someone with a disability, but like I would laugh at something that they would do funny. I think
But if you found it genuinely funny, I think this is kind of ties in with political correctness these days.
Yes.
Right. Where like there's this group that's actually just a loud minority, but they sound like the majority often, who are defending a whole bunch of other people's rights, right, out of their own moral standard. Like they're genuinely trying to do what they believe is right and prevent people from mistreating others. But it's leading to this, right, this phenomenon of inauthenticity, because now you can't act a certain way, even if your intent is so important. Like intent matters, right? Like if you're laughing at someone because you genuinely thought it was funny, right? And there's no malice. And the irony is that it actually brought you closer to that individual by being real with them, right? Than by trying to assume that you know how they feel better than they do and protect those feelings that they may or may not have.
That's right. And any time that I have, like I've joined in and laughed and thought it was funny, that person has like, I've gotten closer with that person.
For sure.
Because I haven't treated them like someone with a disability. Like
you treated them like a human being.
Exactly.
Right.
And they appreciate that. And like my relationships have more than not flourished. And there is no intent in maliciousness in the laughing or whatever. Right. It's just, And like, here's like a small example, you know, we would go bowling, and it was not like, we wouldn't celebrate the person who got the highest score. There was no score, like didn't even need to exist. It was like them getting a ball and rolling it down and getting excited when it went in the gutter or it hit a pin, and they would like just, you know, let out emotions, and it was a safe space for them to do that, and it was just fun and playful to join in on that, right? It was just like, you break down all these preconceived notions that you might have of someone with a disability. And I've talked to a number of people that are, say, in wheelchairs, and like a pet peeve from like little kids to grown adults to seniors will say like, treat me like a normal person. Don't even like acknowledge that this wheelchair is even here. Like, you don't need to treat me any different because I'm in a wheelchair. Like, it's like non-existent. Like, I'm still coherent. Like, I'm still a person. Like, just look at me, and just like, you don't need to take 6 steps and give me this a whole whack load of space to like walk around me just because I'm in a wheelchair, right? Like, they're very independent. They want their independence, and they want to be treated equally. And you can easily do that.
Yeah, people
Even
don't want
even
to be
though,
pitied.
yeah, and even though, you know, people's intention sometimes might be good with that, but uh, so I don't know. I think volunteering and like exposing yourself. Also, like going back to like the weirdos and the people that are like on the fringes. I don't know, like spend time with those people. They're
They're the
not as,
best.
they're, yeah, and like
Yeah.
they're not, I don't know, they're not that, like they're not that bad. or
Yeah,
or
it's never
or
that weird. It's never as weird as weird as the impression.
yeah, I don't know. It's like philosophically, it's like, well, what is weird? It's like humans are like on such a broad scale. So like, what is odd? What is strange? Like, is, you know, playing, you know, creating art your whole life that doesn't bring you any financial sense, is that weird? Or is like hustling, like all these like videos of like multimillionaires don't sleep, you know, like
Yeah,
they get
I know.
up,
I'm just so fucking tired of it.
and it's just
All of
like,
it,
give
man.
me a
And it
break.
just plagues all of my, all of my feeds and ads, if it's YouTube or Instagram or whatever. Like, because
Yeah,
I search a lot of business stuff, like all I see are just these morons, right? It's intolerable. It's
it
intolerable. And
is.
that's why I'm on, like, I used to listen to Gary Vee a fair bit, and now I'm on like a big, like a strict Gary Vee diet. But, because I get it, like sometimes it just sounds like more of the same of that, like the whole hustle. I just don't have any patience for hustle porn anymore. And I think Gary Vee can perhaps be an exception because a lot of the stuff that he says has some substance,
Mm.
right? But for me, it was just simpler to have a black and white boundary where, like, if, yeah, you're in your garage, with your Lamborghini, and just like, they're just all the same. They're all the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, like I saw some video of like some guy working out carrying like weighted, I don't know, weighted stuff, and he's like climbing up a bridge. He's doing a workout, right? And then there's this, you know, music of this inspirational talk going on in the background about like, you know, you don't like, you sleep 8 hours a night, that's a third of your life. It's like, meanwhile, if you actually speak to like sleep scientists, it's like, or I forget who it is, Jeff Bezos. If you talk to him about his day, like he makes sure that he gets like 8-9 hours of sleep. Sleep is very, very important. Don't let all these, yeah, ads or inspirational videos or whatever talk to you about like, oh yeah, like hustle and like you don't need sleep. Sleep's actually very, very important. Get sleep, especially right now. If there's any piece of advice that I would give to people during COVID, is make sure you're getting a lot of sleep. Catch up on a lot of sleep. You'll probably feel great, and you'll get more done. You'll be more productive.
Sure. So then, how can we, like, how do you think we can be more playful in our business pursuits, right? And I think part of it is like having the courage to to forgo financial opportunity for pursuit of something that isn't necessarily a rational outcome, but it'll probably end up bringing you joy, right? So like, how do you have the courage to do that, and how can you apply that, that to business?
The first thing that popped into my mind is how to like articulate this properly. I think there should be more female leaders. I think there should be more female business owners. I think there should be more female politicians.
Are you suggesting that females are irrational? Is that what this is?
No, I think they would.
So I'll tell Jade.
Yeah. No, I think that I think my answer to that is I think a lot of men need to check themselves on what the definition of what it means to be a man in 2020 moving forward. So like the playfulness, it's like, I know when we're all kids, we're playing, and how are most men brought up? We're brought up to like, like, oh, toughen up, don't cry, suck it up, like push through stuff, like all these like messages that you're taught that kind of like shape you into like the definition of like what it means to be a man, when it's like, really take gender out of it. Men are so out of tune with emotions and how to deal with them, especially anger, and rage, and not all. Obviously, this isn't like a
do you think that that by just generally becoming more aware or perceptive of our emotions, we'll be able to express this element of playfulness better?
Totally.
In our business?
Yeah, totally. I actually had a weird thought not long ago where I interacted with an alien from some other planet, and this alien was able to, like that, express a range of extreme emotions. Or I might have dreamed it. I don't know. I can't remember. It might have been on like my hike out in nature, or when I was sleeping. One of the other benefits of sleeping, you get to dream. But it was, I don't know how to say it other than it was weird, it was profound, and it was beautiful, because this creature was just able to express a wide range of emotions very quickly. And I didn't know the alien's gender or whatever, but I just thought that's really interesting. That's something that I think I would want to be able to do. I would want to actually be able to express that. And I think maybe that also ties to like my interest in acting. I would love to get into acting because you get to dive into different characters and explore different emotions and different scenarios and live different lives through acting.
Yeah, you get to experience, right? Like by living a character, you really are experiencing
totally
an entirely different point of view if you're good.
Yeah. And in a safe space or environment, because it allows you to do that. You get to act crazy or really sad or whatever. Usually, you're emphasizing most emotions, but it's heightened because it's acting, and you need to make sure that the audience gets that. So, and you don't often get to act like a lot of actors do, although some people do. Some people live crazy lives like Tiger King or whatever, right? But I forgot where I was going with that. But
did you ever see that? Did you see that Jim Carrey I guess like I don't even know what to call it because it's actually so esoteric. I think was it about Andy Griffiths? Is that his name? Andy Kaufman. Sorry, Andy Kaufman. Did you watch that?
Yes.
Did you I think that's a brilliant example of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like Jim Carrey is like storming around set, and the same way that when Andy did this years ago, it's like people didn't know who was actually going to show up, and like he actually shows up. If it's, I can't remember the character's name, but he's basically the buffoon,
Right.
right? He's the totally arrogant, self-absorbed buffoon, and if he shows up pissed drunk, like he's actually going to throw bottles and start a fist fight, right? He's like fully absorbed in this, and it's like you couldn't talk this person out of it,
Yeah.
right? It's like you can't snap them and to get them to wake up. Like they are being that today, and it's just so funny, and it's I don't know, it's profound.
Yeah. I think, not to segue too much off this point, but if you look at any people that by a large populace would define as great, like the greats, and stick in the art realm, like great musicians, great artists. I think there's like lessons or attributes or values that you can like pull from them, the good ones, and then you can try and instill them in your own life. You might not have like the same talent as they do, but like who cares? You might pull an attribute or value that you deem important from that person, and then go about trying to keep that alive in some way. Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know, to your point about like, going into business and like how you can play more. I think where I was going was and why I said like partner, or there should be more like female leaders, is that I think because men typically want to get into business, they want to create something, their identity is like so tied to the business that they create, that can so easily be taken from you at a moment's instance. Like if your health goes to shit, or if you get in a car accident or something, and then you're not able to carry out your businesses, and so much of that is defined by like who you are, then you're going to be in a place where you're absolutely crushed, and you are going to be like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what like value there is. So I don't know if you need to, I guess, like, yeah, spend more time trying to figure out who you are, and like the failing is like part of the process, because like I think you try lots of things, and then hopefully something sticks, and then you can
Yeah, yeah,
keep
sure. I
going.
think it's like such a widely held misconception that we know what we want to do or who we want to be, and then we pursue that. Whereas I think I'm learning that in reality, you cross those things off the list one at a time, right? And it really is like via negativa, right? Like you figure these things out by subtraction. You have an endless list of things, and you slowly cross one of them off at a time, of what you don't want, or what you don't want to do, or who you don't want to be. And then over time you've whittled away just a much smaller set of things that you still haven't eliminated. And just by the fact that they're lasting, they're certainly much closer, right, to the truth.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, like, we're not going to live forever. We're here for a short period of time. um the more like self-aware you are, the more times that you check in with being as present as possible, I think that can be very helpful. um I just had like two opposing thoughts as I was saying that, because like maybe someone doesn't want to check in with them.
It's great if you argue with yourself and I don't have to argue with you. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm definitely having an internal opposing dialogue. Okay, well, let me finish my thought, then maybe I'll voice my opposing argument after. um you Let me see if I can get back on track here. So You have a short amount of time here. I think a lot of people, especially in North America, it seems, with our culture of just like being in this rat race and just go, 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 go. And we're like putting things on automation. We're not checking in enough. There's not enough like self awareness.
And hopefully the lockdown globally has been a great opportunity for that. I know
Totally.
it was for me, right? To just like, wait, what the hell am I doing? Like, is this actually what I want?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, like checking in with yourself and then making the necessary steps that you need to, but you've checked in, right? Like the more you do that, the better. And I think how that relates to like how men are raised is like typically you bottle a lot of emotions and then eventually it's going to explode, and then that's not good. Whoever is on the receiving end, that's just not healthy. And you're human and you have emotions, so you're better off to like, you know, like unscrew the cap and let the fizz out a little bit at a time, rather than just like shake it until it's just like ready to just burst. And then you like, that's just not good, right? You can't live your life like a volcano. um So I think checking in with yourself and then making these small steps, adjusting accordingly, I think that's what I would say is good. So if you, in one week, if you check in on Monday and then you check in on Friday, and you actually take 5 minutes to be like, how was my week? I didn't play enough, or it was too serious, or it's too monotonous, or whatever. The week got away with you, and like check in and make sure you take like 5 minutes for something for yourself over either that day or the weekend, right? Something that's just for you, whether that be a walk, whether that be if you're in a wheelchair and you just go get some personal space, just yourself. Like just do something just for yourself. And it can be as easy as like a walk for 2 minutes to the end of the street and back. But if you actually did that with a lot of like awareness and intent, then like you're going to be better off than if you didn't do that, I think.
We'd hope.
I'd hope so.
We'd hope. Yeah, can't hurt.
Right. And then that's like practicing for, oh, you know, like I waited 5 days. I'm not going to wait that long because I actually need something a little bit more like example for me with like doing podcasts. Like my goal was to do one a month for a year. And there was times that it was like too long in between episodes, and I like missed it and I craved it and I didn't do enough of them, and it didn't like, I know, it didn't fulfill me enough. Like it was something that was missing in my life that I wanted to do, right? Or if you like play sports, if you go a certain amount of time without playing, you're going to miss it, and you're going to want to go in and do that. And then when you do it, you're like, oh man, like I haven't done this in so long. Or play an instrument, right? It's like those things you gotta keep doing that. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know, life's short. You want to make sure that you're spending your time enjoying it. And
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Living a life that you didn't choose.
mm, yeah, like, and like life's full of randomness. Like it's kind of cruel in a sense because we're beings that want structure and comfort, but if we have too much of it, it's actually not, we like don't like it at the same time,
Of course. Yeah.
right?
It's a balance.
But then there's like all this randomness that happens, and it puts us in uncomfortable situations, or we just feel like uncomfortable and we don't like it because we're programmed not to like it. It's like a weird kind of existence, but that is life. So get comfortable knowing that there is randomness, anything can happen. And so that all you do have is like the present moment. And I'm not saying avoid all pain and not sit in shitty moments or of pain or whatever. I think you should sit in them, because right now during COVID, everyone is in some stage of grief. It's like, what stage are you in currently? Like, check in, lean into that, and then go through the process and like move on. Because I forget what, there's a really good parable about this dad and his son, and it's like one day the son goes off and sells a horse, and he brings home money. He tells his dad, "Hey dad, I just made like a bunch of money. Like, isn't that great?" And then the dad's like, "It's neither great, it's neither bad. It like is what it is," or whatever. And then
sure, good news, bad news, who knows?
Right. And then the next
Right.
day, the son gets drafted, or is about to get drafted off to war, because a war broke out. And the neighbor comes and says, I'm butchering this, but I'll get the point across regardless. And the neighbor comes and says, "Oh, isn't that awful? Like, your son is drafted off to war." And the dad says, "It's neither good, it's neither bad, it is what it is." And so the next day comes and the country makes a peace treaty and they're no longer going to war. And so the neighbor comes back and says, "Oh, isn't that great? Your son gets to stay." And his answer is the same. It's neither bad, it's neither good, it is what it is. So there's two things that I want to say about that parable. One is like, obviously this guy is the definition of like being even keeled and just like nothing really phases him.
It's quite stoic.
Right. And he's going to go through life just, happy medium. Nothing really phases him. If he can live a life like that, great. However, I think there should be some ebb and flow through life, and you should have some highs, some lows, because with lows, the highs are sweeter. And I think it's just finding like a happy balance and not trying to be like too really like extremes. So I don't know, maybe balance, maybe that's the answer. I don't really know. Everyone's like wired differently too. So yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Where else do you want to take this?
I don't know, where do we go from here, man?
Yeah, I don't know.
How much time we got?
I'm good till whenever. Like, do another, say, like 15.
Sounds perfect, man.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that sounds just great.
Yeah. Is there questions that you have had time to think of during this time that you want to just explore and just dig off or check off your list and just be like, yeah, this has been something that's been on my mind lately, currently?
It's a long list. I've had almost too much time for contemplation, and it's been great. It's been great, but it always leaves you in a state of disarray, which is it's a welcomed state of disarray.
Needed.
I don't know. Yesterday, an interesting thought. I had listened to about an hour-long interview with an international journalist society interviewing Anders Tegnell, who is the state epidemiologist for Sweden. And Sweden has taken a very different approach to most with this, with managing their pandemic, largely a much softer approach, like still social distancing. Like it's not, it isn't life as normal, but business is still operating, kids still going to school, a very different approach. And now there's some data, he's kind of talking about what worked and what didn't and what they might change. And that got me thinking about, where is this, like this widespread panic that we all have had, like certainly we need to listen to science, generally, right? And I think that's important. And it's also important to balance that with the rather cynical question of who benefits most from something. And I think in this scenario, like who actually benefits, applying it to contrasting Sweden with Canada and how we've handled a lockdown or not, is like who has largely benefited from the state of panic that most of North America is feeling. And I think the United States might be a bit different because they do have a very different situation than, fortunately, we're experiencing in Canada, right? But here, like this is largely under control, thankfully, right? And it could certainly get out of control, but today it isn't. And thinking about like who benefits most from this, and the obvious answer that I think we would land on is the media in general, right? Like media revenues are, two factors, number of eyeballs and the time that the eyeballs stay on the page. And what a powerful incentive to convey a certain message that would be very, very different than the message that would be circulating in the media in Sweden. So that's something I've been sitting with today. Of, and not to attempt to downplay the obvious risks and just the uncertainty. Like at the end of the day, it's like we don't know if this is a simple bug that will come and go, and in 2 years' time we'll just be it's just another flu bug, no big deal. Or if there are lasting, permanent health consequences, even for those who are asymptomatic now or fully recover. There is a degree of because we know so little about it, it requires a certain degree of care. But I think it also, like we would benefit from also being skeptical and not just blindly accepting all of these truths. Right? I use that in air quotes that are widely circulating, because we don't know anything. We don't know anything yet, and there's a very weighty incentive for panic to be spread right now by those who spread panic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you ask your barber if you need a haircut, the answer is yes. And I think that that analogy might apply right now to all the outlets with from which we're consuming reports on a pretty pressing global issue.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like a media's heyday, unfortunately.
Of course it is, right? Think
Right.
like imagine the money they're making
Mm-hmm.
from this, and to naively assume that the media would pursue truth above all else is exactly that. It's naive.
Mm. I've been thinking lately of conscious marketing, and I've been reflecting on my short career thus far and how I have learned, hopefully, to tune in to, making sure I'm selective in what I'm marketing, period. I've spent time in the for-profit space and then the non-profit space. And so, the last place that I worked at dealt with, it was an organization in Winnipeg, and it provided services for people with disabilities. I had no problem marketing that. I would market that all day long because my intentions were, I don't know, I had good intentions, and making sure one component of my job was storytelling. And I wanted to make sure that I told the story from an informational perspective so that people had the correct, accurate information of X disability. and the barriers that these people faced. And then also written with, even though these people face these disabilities or barriers and have these disabilities, here's what they're able to accomplish. It wasn't like whitewashed hope, but it was just like actually look at this, right? It was to like break down barriers of preconceived notions of people with disabilities and what they were or were not capable of doing. We just said kind of reminds. So anyways, intentional marketing, I think, is something that's just been floating around in my head, and conscious marketing. So going back to awareness, I think, is really key. And I think a lot of marketers need to make sure that they understand what conscious marketing is, and then hopefully they, do a good job at such. Not over catastrophizing something, but getting your point across in a clear way that is hopefully to be taken serious, and that's that. But we've got so desensitized and numb that it just gets more and more ridiculous, and it just gets glazed over, right? Like the stuff that you do hear in the news is ridiculous, but what people sometimes forget is that we're actually living in like, over the course of history, the most peaceful time that we've ever lived in, with the most amount of people. There's an interesting stat that popped out at me in Sapiens, and it was more people die from car crashes per year than like, I don't know, violent deaths. But you hear about all the violence and deaths in the news, right? But like
there's no incentive of peaceful times. The book I'm reading right now, Nassim Taleb talks about just this, right? Like there's no money in peace journalism.
Right.
There just isn't. Right.
But then it also makes me think of happiness and Sweden. And I know the study of happiness, it's relatively new. But the little that I know in regards to happiness is that I think as a country, I think Sweden ranks pretty high up there. Right. And so that culture, that country values that probably higher than some other things. And I think this pandemic has put leaders and countries in a position of, do you care more about the economy or protecting people's health? It's like, which one do you want, right? If you're going to...
Well, sure. And there's also an obvious relationship between them, which we can't ignore, right?
Yeah. Oh,
like
totally.
It's not healthy for 30% of people to not have the meaning of a job.
Totally.
Right. And if everyone's in the breadline, that's not particularly good for health either, be it mental, physical. Right.
That's right. So yeah. So I don't know, it's very challenging, and there's many, many factors that come into play. So who is to benefit most? I know Sweden probably, in a sense, will come out on top, depending on how you look at it, but maybe the overall general population will come out happier. But I don't know, what is their infrastructure like from a health standpoint to be able to provide the services needed for their country, right? Like in the States, I mean, how many people have healthcare, common healthcare? Take a pandemic out of it, there's so many people that, for lack of a better word, are totally fucked. And then now you add a pandemic into it. It's like, well, the country needs to correct their healthcare system. And the majority of countries worldwide aren't set up for a pandemic. And so they need to make sure that in the future, hopefully, because humans are pretty short-sighted, that we take the necessary precautions to stockpile masks, to make sure that our healthcare system is properly equipped for something like this, so that you can actually do things like Sweden, right? If we
As like we
had
were
all the
vastly underprepared.
yeah, we're vastly underprepared. And why? It's 2020. This is stupid. Why? Because we've all been sleeping. We've all been going.
Yeah, the decadent West. It's just too comfortable.
Yeah. And so I don't know. Good on Sweden. I'd like to see how, like, you know,
Yeah,
which
it's interesting. It's a long-term approach,
yeah.
right? Like he sort of shared that his strategy, the intent of the strategy was that it would be sustainable for the entire duration that it took to get to a vaccine that'd be widely accessible. So, 12 to 18 months. And as we now know, a lockdown is certainly not sustainable for 12 to 18 months. And we'll all go crazy. We'll be crazy. And like Bill Burr says, that you can't make 60% of the country homeless, like it's too great. It's too great a cost. And he's saying that facetiously because he is all for, so, physical distancing and whatnot. But it's true, right? Like Sweden's approach of choosing something that they deem to be sustainable. Everyone still has their jobs. Kids are still going to school. Only high school and universities are doing distance learning. They said both because there's plenty of evidence to suggest that it's effective. First of all, like it works really well. It doesn't really work well for younger kids. And that those people travel a lot more, not just between cities or what have you, but just around. Like they're much more mobile, that they cover a lot more ground every day. So they have a higher probability of being a vector for disease than kids who go to school and back. Like they just don't interact with as many people, which I thought was interesting. And then not only now, if parents choose to work from home, as I believe many in Sweden are, it makes it possible to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like my kind of like my right hand man in Winnipeg, like he's got 2 kids, 4 and 6 ish. Forgive me if I get it wrong, Dan. But like it's nearly impossible for him. Like he's running a daycare while trying to do his job, right? Like and like the added stress that all parents are feeling or must be feeling right now because their kids are out of rhythm. Like that adds a level of unsustainability as well.
Totally. I think,
Yeah.
I think on, it depends on the age of the kid or kids and the family dynamic. I know some parents that are loving it and, they've got all this extra time with their kids. And I mean, out in, at least in the Okanagan here, a lot of families homeschool and they've enjoyed having this extra time. And take that with a grain of salt because that's ephemeral and there's
Yeah, it's
probably
pretty
really low
anecdotal
times
and it's
as
got to be a
well.
minority. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the kids that are staying at home for school and now the parents that are still working full time and then raising kids, you're now the teacher, you're now you're doing everything. It's got to be absolutely just exhausting. And I could definitely appreciate just how difficult that is. And you want, life to kind of go back to normal as much as possible. Yeah, I don't know. Cause like looking at like Sweden's approach, like you could say, well, I know they also maybe you take the argument side of they maybe realize and understand or put at a higher level of importance like people's mental health, mental well-being. They value that really, really high.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're able to just go ahead and make that decision because that is, that could be very detrimental to if you took that away from them and look at other countries that don't give two shits about their society's mental well-being and they're in extreme lockdown and the stress that it has on the families. And they have, I was talking to a neighbor of mine he's from India and he's got family in India and they've been on very strict lockdown in this particular city. And like the grocery stores are closed down and people
it's crazy.
don't even have
Yeah.
access to get to that. How stressed are they? What's their level of?
Well, I'm saying like the shocking, like now that there's data that's coming out, like the shocking thing is like, yes, Sweden's rate of infection is slightly higher, but it's not that much higher.
Yeah.
Right. And even if they have 60 people dying, which is 60 terrible tragedies, and it's important to like to remember, like they're not numbers on a page. Like those are people's lives, and that's a family's family member.
Mm-hmm.
But 60, right? Like 60 deaths instead of 30 deaths is double, but it's 30 deaths, right? It's 30 deaths in a country of millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's important to keep it in perspective, right? And not lose sight of the like like Daniel Kahneman would say, like the base rate. You know, like what's the actual base rate here? Because 1% of a small number is a small number, and 2% of something is double. But if it's still a small number, it's still small.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One other really interesting, an interesting piece of the strategy he mentioned was they didn't encourage anyone to wear any masks, regardless of whether it was deemed scientifically to be effective or not. They didn't care about that. They thought that suggesting people to wear masks would encourage them to go out unnecessarily. And they were like, they wanted to encourage people that if you feel slightly sick, even slightly, stay home. Don't take any risk with it. Stay home. And by not giving people a false sense of responsibility by giving them that, oh, it's okay, I can wear the mask, they thought that there would actually be a net benefit because more people would follow the direction to stay home if they felt at all ill.
That's like smart mass reverse psychology.
Right? Very interesting. Like it's thinking of the secondary effects of these things, like, right? Like the downstream effects of these decisions, which is so interesting. Instead of just first order consequences, like they're actually thinking of, third, fourth order consequences. And I mean, I'd like to think that our government is too, but I don't know, that just struck like, it just seems so interesting, different.
Yeah. It's forward and kind of like European long-term, like North American long-term is very short-term.
Yeah. So we cannot think longer than a quarter, like, right, to save our lives. Like usually it's day to day.
Yeah.
It's funny. And you contrast it with China where it's like, they're thinking 100 years ahead.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's wild.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun. This is
Killer,
good,
man. Yeah. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me out.
Thanks for, hey, this is great. Thanks for being on the podcast, and I'll let you know once it's posted live, and we'll have to do a round 2 sometime.
I'd like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Take care of yourself, man.
Yeah, you too.
See you later.
Yeah, you bet.
Ciao.
Cheers.